So good morning. We have today on the podcast Network Yourself to Success, we have David Zeff and Oleh, originally from Australia. And David has over more than 10 years experience in selling technologies to hundreds of SMB and enterprise companies. He's right now the CEO of Whistle, and he's been the founder and of two companies, two startups that he took to exit. So he has a lot of experience in the whole software as a service in sector here in Israel. And today I'm really happy that you came here to talk a little bit more about how do you build a career and build a relationship in this sector, and especially coming from Oleh, it seems like really a field that is a lot of opportunities in.
Yeah. Hey, Johnny, and everyone listening. I'm happy to share my insights. It's kind of surreal to be, asked these questions, because when I came here, 6 years ago, I had a vision that I was going to, make a success of my experience here. But I actually didn't really have a roadmap to that. And to be honest, I had a really great, I would say lucky, but I don't believe in luck. So I would just say blessed opportunity to join at a very early stage at a company called Graduate, where I joined like the number 8 person, and that company grew and I grew a lot in that. So the time that I spent there really helped develop me, in a lot of ways in terms of my sales experience and management experience. And we took that company to exit, which was a really exciting experience for everybody, and made great connections in that process. But, I would be lying if I said that I came here with like a plan other than to say that, I would do whatever it took to make a success of my life here, and that I really wanted to live here. And live here, enjoy living here, obviously. So that's basically the start, and I think as a result of that, a lot of opportunities have opened up, and that's kind of led to where I'm at today. But I definitely don't feel like I've made it in any way, but I'm definitely happy with the journey that's that I've gone through over the last 6 years here so far.
Great. And so no, definitely. For 6 years, you've done a lot, I think. Well, how did you get the first job in Graduate? And what is your background before that, by the way, in Australia?
Yeah, so in Australia, I was in the fitness industry for about 6 years. I started as a personal trainer while I was at university. And then I realized that personal trainers in general just had really bad business management skills. So I co-founded a technology startup called One Fit Stop that still exists, by the way. It's actually raised some more money since I left. And what we were doing was business administration for trainers and helping them with billing and sales and marketing and all the things that are already boring and hard for people who, are fitness trainers to do. I was CEO of that company for 3 years, and I really wanted to move here. And we tried to make it work with me being here in Israel, and it just wasn't really working. So I sold my equity, and which was also a really good thing because it gave me a big boost for my start here. And I was basically, I'd met my wife, and I was looking for a place to work just to kind of pay our rent ahead of our wedding. We were like 2 months out from getting married. I was still living with my parents, and I saw an ad for a local company in Ra'anana called Graduate. I said, hey, that's great. One, they're local. And 2, it's just like I will pay the bills and then I'll figure things out later. I started at the bottom. And I think that that's also really important for Olim to think about. It's not just Israel. Any country that you go to, you always start out levels lower than you were. I was CEO of a startup and I'd done a lot of things. I started here as an SDR, just doing cold calls. And in the beginning, that was a really hard adjustment. And the CEO, when he interviewed me, sat down with me and he said, look, I think you'd be great here. I think we're going to struggle keeping you, but I want to try and develop you. And to his credit, he really did. And I think to my credit, I stuck with it and carried on always kind of pushing the envelope, saying, hey, you got me in first gear. I can take this even further. And I grew in that company. It was actually within 2 months of being an SDR, they promoted me to an account executive. That role I held my whole time there, but then I got promoted at the same time to management roles. So that then evolved into being the VP of the sales development team, and I ran a 15-person SDR team. And then as the company continued to grow, we started to target different business units based on location and industry type. And I opened up the K to 12 industry for the company and managed the US sales team. And then we had the exit. So during that whole experience, obviously, bringing it back to like the network and, I was fortunate enough to work with a lot of brilliant people and make some really great friends. And I think as an Oleh, I think that one of the important things of getting a job is your social group. I think that that's a huge thing. And in this country specifically, especially in, let's say, startup land, once you're in the system, it's really easy to progress. I think the real trick is just getting started. I think a lot of people make the mistake of waiting for that ideal job because you usually think of it in the same terms as, let's say, in your previous country where, I was a whatever, right? I was a manager. I'm not going to come here and do cold calling. And it's like, no, start from scratch. Be ready to do that. And you will grow. This is a country that rewards people who innovate, who work hard, who dream. This is the place for it. But if you don't recognize that, it can be a really painful experience. And I think that that's a lot of the reason why, people move back, right? Is because they came here expecting, well, I'm just going to take that exact life I had and just do the exact same thing in a completely different place. That's never worked. That's how species become extinct, right? So you do have to come here being able and willing to hit the reset button. It helped that I didn't have kids and I wasn't married before I came here. So I was still very flexible, in terms of what I was doing.
You took a step back, just take a step forward.
100%. And you know what? I think that Israelis get a lot of there's a lot of opinions about the Israelis as people. The one thing that I haven't really found in this country is a massive ego. I think that specifically in Australia, I think you're always trying to keep up with the Joneses, and specifically in the Jewish community, just being honest with you. Whereas in Israel, I feel like the culture here is not so much like, hey, what do you do and what car do you drive and where do you live? I think it's more about who you are and the actual, the life that you're leading and what you're living in. Maybe that's just been my perception, but I always felt like Israelis valued, experience over things.
So maybe that's the issue you raised, that you don't get, you might come from a country where you get a little bit stigmatized by what position you have. And if you start low, you might think that you're going to stay low in that sense.
Yeah.
And that's why you have to set the bar as high up as you can. But you say, like, course start, when you start here, you start low, and you're not going to be stigmatized where you're going to be. It's respectful, it's respected, and you'll grow from there, and you won't be stuck there. But get a foot inside the door. You mentioned a little bit about social circles while you're working there. You said that you belong. So what did you belong to?
I mean, the truth is, for the first, I would say, 3 years of my Aliyah, most of my friends were from Graduate. Okay, that was like a second family to me. And I felt like that. It was hard to leave, right? But I felt like that all the way to the end because I grew up with the company and the company grew up with me. And, people that have been there for, you see these people all day, right? I was working really long hours, which is maybe the other thing, just as a side point. If you do want to succeed here, you just have to be prepared to do what it takes. I would have never expected in Australia that I would be working in jobs where my day started at 2 p.m. and ended at midnight. To me, that would have just been absolutely bizarre. But in Israel, that's basically been the hours I've always worked for the last 6 years. So I think, except for now, right? But I think that that's something that you also have to think about. But with regards to the social group, I think the benefit of working at a company, and what I would give most Olim a tip to do, is to try and go after a well-known brand name that's a big company first. I was lucky that the early stage startup that I started at became a big company and had an exit. But I rolled the dice. If I had started at like Checkpoint or Wix or Waze or whoever, one of those really recognizable names, it makes it so easy to transition your career. Plus, socially, you're going to be exposed to so many people. And some of those people are going to go on to found their own companies, or maybe you'll partner with, or you'll employ them again. And, your network in this country is absolutely critical. And, at the same time, it's fun and it's good to make friends, right? And, that not everyone has to be worth a dollar amount to you, but just the support is really important, because moving to any country is hard. Moving here when you don't have great Hebrew is harder, right? So having people who've done that and been through the same experiences is pretty important, I think, for your own mental state and being able to survive here.
No, definitely. I also have friends still from 8 years ago. I worked in a tech company, my first job. This is something I can still pick up the phone and they can make an introduction for me and they will do it like they were family. So that's definitely right. I mean, your first company, you'll build relationships and people are pretty loyal here afterwards to keep up with that. It's kind of like you might have your fights while you were working together but I can pick up the phone even to people that we weren't working so well with then, and they'll be like nostalgic for them to help me. Yeah. So yeah.
So it's so true. I mean, recently, I've had some really, really great conversations with and rekindled friendships with people that, I might be cutting out. I've had like great conversations and rekindled friendships with people that I actually wasn't necessarily so close to when I was actually working with them. Yeah. But because we have that past history, I wonder if it's something to do with the way, I think it's two things. One, everyone here is basically an Oleh, right? There's actually very few Israelis that are like from way back when, pre the state. So whether you're an Oleh from like the post, Holocaust period, or an Oleh, you know what I mean? Whether your grandparents are Olim, your parents are Olim, or you're an Oleh, someone's an Oleh. So they all kind of, I think everyone kind of gets that, right? We're a country of refugees, ultimately, right? And then I wonder if the other part of it is because of like the military and socialist kind of culture here of like, you were part of the Sevet. Like I was from the graduate Sevet. So if I come across people that, some of my colleagues work at really successful startups now, and I know that I can kind of, get an in there or, whatever, because we work together and that was our group. Yeah, there is something to that for sure. And it's a small country. I mean, that's the other big thing, right? It's a really, really small country. It's a small space. And you'll find that out only after a couple of years.
Yeah.
Easy to make around.
Seems big in the beginning, but it's pretty small. So how do you see it differently when building relationships in Australia and in Israel? I mean, if you don't you had to start up in Australia, so you know how to network in Australia. What do you see as the main difference of the way you approach people, the way you ping people, keep in touch with and nurture relations?
Yeah, I mean, I found Israel so much easier than Australia. The average Australian will be very polite to you. Like if your car breaks down on the side of the road outside their house at midnight, they won't come out to fix your car with you.
How do you feel that it affects the business-wise the way people network and connect here?
Yeah, so I think Australians in general are a bit colder. They're very polite, but they're a bit colder, and they're quite reserved. So I can tell you, as a startup in Australia trying to raise money, it's very hard because the investors want to go into like a sure thing. They're not necessarily prepared to take risk. I think also that people aren't so, what the word is, I don't want to say accepting because that's not a fair word, but in Israel, everyone is kind of, I think the default is like, we're friends unless I find out that we're enemies. If you meet someone, they're like, hey, yeah, so-and-so, come on for lunch with us. It's just like that. And then then you find out at lunch, like, oh, we can't stand each other, then fine. But whereas I think in Australia, it's kind of, it's like if you're unknown quantity, then I'll be very wary about approaching you. I'll be civil, but it takes a long time to build a close connection.
Also, within the Jewish community?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, the Jewish community always around the world is a little bit different because it's, it is kind of like the world's best alumni network, right? Where, if you're Jewish and I'm Jewish, we can probably find a lot of common ground, right? And I'll probably go more out of my way to help you just because there is a special connection there. But I think in Australia, working in Australian companies and doing business in Australia is very different culturally to here. It's much more reserved. It's much more like a stiff, collar and tie. Very much like there's lots of levels and layers. It's not like you can just shoot an idea straight to the CEO. I think Israel, because by nature it's such an innovative country, one, and because there's so many startups here,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of the traditional management barriers aren't there, for better or for worse, to be honest. And also, I think just networking in general is relatively easy here, as long as you get over yourself and you're prepared to, the hardest thing for me was like, I was so scared to say the wrong words in Hebrew if I had to speak Hebrew, and look like an idiot. And I've got like so many funny stories now as a result. Once I ordered a falafel in kulam, and the guy's like, kulam, baim. And like everyone was like laughing, he's like, he wants a falafel with everyone in it instead of everything. But fine, whatever, but it's a funny story, right? I just started sharing that story, and I had a lot of Israelis who were like always saying to me like, oh, I love these Oleh stories, they're so funny, and like people don't mind, like they don't punish you for it. Whereas I think as an Oleh to other countries, I can only speak as someone who moved to Australia. It took us a long time to get accepted there. It took us a really, really long time, because they want you to become Australian, and they don't necessarily want you to acknowledge, let's say, maybe where you came from. You came as a South African to Australia and you remain very South African. It's very hard to break into the culture there. Just is. Okay, people can disagree, but that was my experience for 14 years or 13 years, however long I lived there.
So how do you feel today with the increased remote working, or working from home and connecting from? Today we don't have all these meetups that we used to have in Israel, and especially in these times of the corona. So how do you network online? How do you connect to people? And seeing it here in Israel, then how do you connect to people online without those things, without actually taking people out to coffee? Or what is your advice?
Well, look, I mean, I had a virtual Zoom coffee with a guy this morning at 9:30, just chatting about, I don't know, getting himself started actually in Israel. I think that, look, the same way everyone else is doing it around the world. I don't know if there's anything specific here. I made a point when this whole pandemic started to regularly reach out to some family and friends and just kind of keep in touch, because it's natural for me just to kind of focus on just working and whatever is in front of me and forget. And then you do miss out socially. The other night I actually went out with a bunch of my friends. I went over to a friend's house, and it was so nice. It's been so long since I've, had the opportunity to be around like other people socially. But I think it definitely has impacted on communication. I think it's definitely going to impact a lot on the way businesses run going forward. And I also don't think it's over. I think that we probably, hopefully not, but if there is such thing as a second wave in winter, and the world economy does what it just did again, I think that, it's going to be pretty complicated and pretty difficult. And so, one of the things I think that people should be investing a lot of their time in is building an online presence for themselves. I spent a lot of time building a profile for myself on LinkedIn over the last 2 years or so. I mean, it's how, why we're talking, right? It's how you knew of me.
Yeah, exactly. I saw you on a podcast somewhere else, and you spoke about the subject of sales and marketing in Israel specifically. I thought this is a great person to interview for how do you network in that field. So yeah, definitely you created an online presence for yourself that even.
And I think anyone can do it. It costs you nothing. It's a few minutes every day. And again, remember, this country is really small. So someone is going to either read your stuff if it's LinkedIn, or if you're on a good Instagrammer or whatever, see your videos, or whatever it is. And whether you work for someone or you start your own thing, that's actually a really, really important skill. And specifically now, if it does turn out that remote work becomes the way forward for the majority of companies, then you also got to remember that you could work in Israel for a company that's overseas, and there's none of the barriers that used to exist are there anymore, right? So that creates an amazing talent pool and opportunity. And to be honest, as an Oleh, if you can earn in dollars or pounds and live in shekels, then you're doing great. So I would say that the thing that you can maybe want to take out of this period is double down on your online presence, right? Because that's a whole world that you can exist in that is not going to be affected by lockdowns and what have you.
So what is the process? You invest a little time every day on either writing a post. It has to be something, of course, of value. It's not something like a lot of annoying posts these days. a lot
Yeah.
of videos of people
Yes.
with their cat and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So of course, find something that's, especially on LinkedIn, something that's professional. Then what more can you do beside that? Can you? I mean, of course, you can comment other people's posts, try and create some. How do you connect in a way that's not, without you also expert in connecting with sales? Like I've been doing cold calls. It's
Yeah.
tough to do cold calls. Not everybody
Yeah.
likes to do cold calls. How do you connect? How do you warm the conversation? Warm the cold call?
Well, I think I saw a stat yesterday, 67% of people say that they hate cold calling. And these are people that are employed to cold call. So, I get it. I think you have to embrace it. It's a gift. It's a skill. It's a talent that will get you any job anywhere, any opportunity anywhere, because everything's a cold call. I mean, I met my wife through a cold call. Her friend introduced us, right? Said, hey, I've got a friend who you might want to meet. But I wasn't like in Australia, for example, whenever I had met a girl before, it was through a social group or whatever. It was a friend of a friend or a friend's sister or whatever. Whereas, I had to cold call my wife, right? And that turned out pretty good. I started my career here cold calling. And it is hard. I got to be honest. I mean, I remember there was a period that I haven't really spoken about this a lot, but I found it's like quite emotionally tough to do it because it feels in some ways degrading because you'll get a lot of people saying no and slamming down the phone on you and whatever. But then you just realize it's actually not about you. No one actually even remembers. You could call them the next day. They wouldn't even remember that you contacted them. And once you realize that, you're not so precious about it. And you just have to keep doing it. And you do become better at it. You become much more savvy at it. And if you're working at a good company that's got you speaking to the right kinds of people, it's selling a valuable product. More often than not, people are going to at least be interested in talking to you about it. Whether they agree to have a meeting or work with you afterwards, I don't know. But at the moment, that's what I do today, right? That's what Whistle does. We sell, ultimately, cold calls, right? We're in the business of selling meetings, of connecting companies with their future customers and their next best customer. And the reason why we are in business is because a lot of people just hate doing that, right? But I think as a life skill, it's really, really important. And that doesn't have to just be business. It can be, a lot of people are scared just socially to branch out. Why? It's not the end of the world. If you somehow meet a friend through a friend, and you want to connect with that person, it's okay to send them a message. Hey, great meeting the other day. I'd love to catch up for a coffee or whatever. Let's go for a bike ride, whatever it is you do. And as an Oleh, that's a really, really critical skill. You have to put yourself out there. And the fun part about moving countries, the best part about moving countries is you can reinvent yourself.
Yeah, you can reinvent yourself. You can also play what I call the Oleh card. So that means that you can play on the fact that you're new. I don't know how, as you say, you was in Australia. I said it wasn't that easy in Australia, but in Israel, in Denmark, I also don't think you can play on it too much. Like, I'm a new immigrant, so what? I mean, so we're going to meet for coffee, so what? I mean, why should we? Well, I think in Israel, it's a little bit easier to use that as a jumping point to, I need some advice about your field. Like if you were today coming from Australia, making Aliyah today, and you want to make it in the sales or marketing in a SaaS company, how would you approach it?
So the first thing I would do is, on an attitude level, you have to, if you are coming to live here, you have to tell yourself that you're never going back. It's like the Cortez burn the boats. It's just not an option. You can obviously, it is an option, right? You got your passport.
That's what you say in Australia. In Denmark, we say burn the bridges. Don't burn the bridge. But,
right. There's no bridges to connect to. We're an island in the middle of the sea, so we have to burn the boats, right? Yeah, there's the harbor bridge, but that's inside. So I think that's number one. I think mentally, you got to come here with the attitude that I'm going to do what it takes to make it work. I think practically what I would do coming into Israel is a few things. One, I would set up an overseas company before I made Aliyah. Okay, irrespective if you land up working it or not, there's Oleh tax benefits for people who had a company that you can claim dividends tax-free. It's really important, and whether you decide to actually do something with that company later or not, it's worth you just doing. That's the first thing I would have done differently. The second thing is that I would really make sure I had a good CV coming into it, or I would try and get some experience in the technology world. in the startup world or something like that in my home country, because ultimately, the main industry you're probably going to land up working in is startup. That's where most English speaking, at least, or other foreign language speaking people are going to land up working, because they need the talent and it pays well. Then I would probably go and try and get a job at the best logo, most successful startup that I could find, or company that I could find in the country, because it's going to help you build your brand, and it's going to make it much easier to go from there into any other job, whether it's into another really big company or whether it's into a very senior position at a smaller company, right? So if you got up to, let's say, director level at a big company, you can walk into a head of sales, VP of sales role at a small company.
Yeah.
And that just kind of changes everything.
You would join a startup, but basically a technology company. That's what you
number one, I think so, yes. I think one, it pays the best. Two, you're going to find a lot of like-minded Olim.
Yeah.
And I think three, there's so much job opportunity in that space that once you're in that system and you're a proven entity, you're never really going to, struggle for work. I don't really know other industries here that well, in terms of, I don't know, construction or finances or, what have you. But I know people who've done well in those, but that's not really the journey I've taken. So I can't really give advice. But I think once you start at like a really successful company in this country, it's easier to grow. And then I would spend a lot of my time here really focusing on personal growth and personal branding, realizing it's a really small space and people are watching what you do, and it's very easy to get your name out there, and then just network, go to events, meet people. I took a long time to do that. I'm not naturally that kind of person. I've only really started doing that the last 2 years or so.
You seem pretty social. You also seem that type as a salesperson that's extroverted. I mean, do you have to be an
No, I'm not at all. I'm not at all. I just put on the persona. I'm just good at, like my brand, my personal brand is very, in some ways, a different character to who I am. In sales, you learn to do that. Like, you learn that you kind of got to project. I actually, I was a personal trainer for a long time, and I think that personal training gave me the foundation for that, because you've always got to have like a good attitude, and you've got to be driven and motivated. Otherwise, no one wants to go to like a depressed or miserable personal trainer, right? Yeah. They can come to you depressed and miserable though, that you deal with every day. But I think that's good grounds for it. And I'm not an extroverted person at all. My wife always teases me about it. Like, who are your friends, whatever. I have like a group of very close friends that I spend most of my time with, close friends and family. I'm polite to other people. I'll network with them for business reasons or whatever. But I'm definitely not like someone who's like, not happy to be by themselves. I'm actually very, very happy to be by myself and spend time by myself, maybe to my detriment, right? So I think that post this Corona period, though, that changes everything, because, even someone like me, who's not the most social person in the world, looks at this and goes, wow, I actually miss human beings. I wouldn't mind just, working in an office, right, with a bunch of people around me, just so I could talk to people. So yeah, I think that will change. But
it also says something, by the way, when you study the whole field of networking. So the surprising thing is that a lot of great networkers are actually introverted. Like this, you would think that that someone who's great at building relationships and building networks, they're like those type of people, like going to a party and like, hey, what's up, Bill? I'm really extroverted. But that's not according to statistics. According to when you see profiles of great introverted networkers, it's something else, right? It's something else about building some kind of trust or some kind of like connection with the other person, and that's just made of style, how you do it, which way you do it.
Yeah.
So do you spend a lot of time on nurturing not your social friends, even though friends is of course also important for your career, but do you spend a lot of time like consistently nurturing your professional network here in Israel? Like, you set like on your calendar times off for pinging, or is it just automatically?
It's automatically. So I got into a habit to daily, at the very least daily, post something on LinkedIn, and then that naturally lends to interacting with people, and then that opens up all sorts of opportunities, and that's kind of how Whistle started, to be honest. I got approached by a VC who had a portfolio company and wanted me to get involved and help them. They had read what I was writing. They'd heard about my like exit at Graduate, and then that kind of spun everything off. And I've landed consulting gigs from it, and customers from it, and all sorts of like professional friends and actual friends. I think it is a daily process. I could definitely be more systematic about it. I'm trying to be now much more systematic about it because your network is a weapon that you can really use. But I think at the very least, just get into the habit of, if we're talking specifically about personal branding and online networking, then just get into the habit of doing that daily, and it does turn out quite well for you.
Amazing. So if I was to then Oleh coming to Israel, I'm looking for a job in the SaaS, sales and software, B2B, then building up my personal brand, just writing every day, even do a podcast, do a blog, or do something about that, writing about the issue, the topic, and then people will contact me or ping me on comment me, and then I will reach back to them, and then that will be a great way to start, you say? Yeah,
I think and pick something that you're already interested in, or you got a unique perspective on. As an Oleh, the thing you can really write about is getting started, right? And your journey. Everyone thinks that people want to read about the end, the destination that you got to. No one actually wants to read about that. No one actually like, wow, that's cool, but it lasts like 1 second. Yeah. Hey, I made $100 million. Wow, that's cool. What really is interesting is how did you get there, right? And if you can break it down, well, I started, and all these amazing success stories, why are we inspired by them? Is because it's always like, a person started from down here and he worked really hard, and, or she worked really hard, and then suddenly got lucky, got a break, and it did that well and grew, and they were just at the right time, at the right place, and then they got there. But so if I was new to this country and maybe even new to the startup world, I would maybe start like just blogging about that experience or sharing that experience. So many people could relate to it, or at least interested by it. And I've seen like I don't do this really well. For me, the way I've kind of branded myself is come from like a certain level of like knowledge and experience. Okay. And people think I know what I'm doing because I tell them I know what I'm doing. Right. But I know
also because you see your results. I mean, you've done pretty well. I mean,
maybe, right? I don't know. I think so, but I'm sure people have done better, right? I'm not but I think that someone I follow as well, how she built her profile is all about like on like vulnerability. The way that she talks online is very like she doesn't project herself at any sort of like image, and she's like massively exploded right in her profile as well, because people relate to it. It's more like, it's like, oh, you're just a regular person who's trying to figure out her way around the world. But I guess we also have different experiences and different levels of expertise. I just think that if you're trying to build up your brand and you're trying to get yourself out there, then you probably want to focus on topics that you have some knowledge about, that you enjoy talking about, and just do something. It doesn't really matter if it's perfect. Just do it. Just try. The most important thing is at least to try and be consistent with it.
Cool. So what about if you're not a native English speaker and when you want to work in sales or marketing in Israel? It seems like, again, we deal, and where my day-to-day work, I deal with Olim from France, from Russia. Seems like, you are it's so much easier if you're a native English speaker. What are the chances for people who's not native English speakers to get a job in that field?
I think number one, I think the world is a lot easier for you if you're a native English speaker.
Yeah.
That's just the way it is. But there are so many companies that are hiring, especially the large ones, that are hiring for people who speak native tongue, French, German, Spanish, Portuguese. And if you're good, you will never be short of a job. I mean, like, there's so many, and there's so few people in this country that can do that. If you're, let's say, like, I don't know, a Russian speaker or whatever, and you have sales and marketing experience, you know how to break into the Russian market, and you go work for, like, I don't know, a cybersecurity company, right? Selling to Russia. There are companies just, you can map this out, by the way. You can do this very systematically. I think that's also a big problem. People come here and they go like, oh, hey, who's going to help me? It's like, hey, you can actually help yourself. There's all of these networks, I mean, there's like sites like Mapped in Israel, for example, right? There's obviously companies like, like Bahim that help you, but let's say you're just trying to figure it out yourself. There's all sorts of sites. You could map out the startup space. You could look through those companies, what interests you, look into the markets they sell. You could probably Google Israeli companies selling to Russia, right? You could go to the embassy, the Russian embassy, and say, hey, can you help me, like advise like me which companies or whatever that, are big companies that you can put me in touch with that sell into Russia. I'm sure there are a couple, right? So,
well, let's say you have a good English, strong English, but you just have an accent. I mean, I have a Danish accent, but also let's say even people who have a French accent a little bit more, my accent, they just can't place it because it could be somewhere in America that just doesn't know, nobody knows
right.
any accent. But French and Russian accent, you hear right away. Can you still work, even though if you have a good level of English, you're really good English, but it's not, you still have a strong accent. Can you work in pretty English speaking market?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think that specifically if you sell to America, they love an accent. For me, I've always felt like the salespeople that have really succeeded the most are those that have some sort of accent, because this is completely my theory. I have no data on this, but I feel like Americans specifically, like they don't necessarily like buying from Americans, but if you're like a foreigner, you're Dutch, you're French, you're Australian, it's like exotic, you know what I mean? And you can very easily break down barriers just on that. Okay. I would, often start, sorry about my crazy accent, or people all the time try to pick where I'm from, because I don't have like a very South African, I don't have a very Australian, it can be quite confused. And that's an icebreaker, it gets you in the door and great, and just own it. I think if that's who you are, then step into that. Don't try and hide from it and add all of these layers to pretend that you're someone else. It just makes your life so much harder. So it comes as you grow up, but it's really hard to do when you're younger. But as you grow up, you just realize like, this is who I am, and people have to accept me for it, right? And I have to accept myself for it.
So in your field, when again, sales and marketing, and special sales in the SaaS companies, so of course you can map out, and I would use more Startup Nation Central, which is a really good website for mapping out the startup companies. Mapped in Israel used to be good, but I think that they haven't updated it for a while. I think that it's like kind of like, but what I was thinking about was, where would you find out who are the super connectors in this field, in the field of sales and marketing? Like, who are the people that, if you met with that guy, he could open up, you could be a super connector, or someone who's like in this space and he just knows a lot of people. You could go to meetups, of course, and you'll probably find them there, but you know what I mean? Like, there's some people when you meet them for coffee, that will be like, it's like meeting 10 other people for coffee, because they can just introduce you to so many more people.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess the one way I would think about it is, you can, firstly, there's people like myself who have a big social following and put out a lot of content, and by definition might know a lot of people, connect you to a lot of people. I think but like, I don't know if you can do it scientifically. I think the best way to do it is just to put yourself out there and try and get in touch with people. You will hear names thrown around here, especially in startup world. There's certain people that have been like super successful. There's lots of people that are just naturally out there trying to help and connect people. And you can find out about them, like, just by asking others, right? Who do you know? Or just going to, these kind of networking events. Yeah, I mean, for me, I think connecting to those people just came with time. And I remember once, someone, we hired a manager at Graduate. It was like an executive vice president. And he basically said, look, like, you guys know what you're doing, but no one knows who you are. And you have to build your brand. You have to build your network. And I already took that on. And until then, I wasn't ready talking to or connecting with other salespeople in this country. And I started doing that, and definitely he was right. That's an important thing to do.
Yeah. Great, David. I'll have to end there. I also don't want to take more of your time. You have you're building your own company. You want to give a 1 minute talk a little bit to promote your company, or is it stealth mode or?
Yeah, look, happy to. So no, we're definitely not in stealth mode. We're in come and work with us mode. Um, so Whistle is a marketing agency, a go-to-market agency that's really focusing on the top of the funnel. We're focusing on helping businesses connect with their next best customer, have more conversations with customers, and be more successful. The reason why I started Whistle was after 10 years of working in the startup space, I realized that what startups are really good at is designing really fun and innovative projects and products and getting funding behind them. They're not so great at actually deploying that in a strategic and structural way that gets them to the market and helps them dominate that. And that's what we do. And so Whistle is all built on the principle of taking either a Series A funded company and getting them to market as effectively and efficiently as possible, or working with large enterprises that need help boosting their pipeline. And that's what we do. We're a traditional business, right? We try to behave like a traditional business as opposed to a startup. But I think one of the important lessons here, and for everyone who is listening, is there is the gold rush in Israel, which is the startup space and the funding and what have you. And then there's the guys that sell the shovels to the gold rushers.
The Levi's.
Yeah, and that's where I'm trying to be, right? I've spent 10 years in the gold rush, and it's been fun. And now I'd just like to help sell the dream, right? And not and then win along the way as all these companies succeed as well. So yeah, that's our story. And thanks, Johnny. I appreciate it chatting. The other thing is as well, I do have limited time, but I'm always happy to try and help people. I feel like we could always benefit from connecting. So if you want to connect with me, you can find me on LinkedIn. It's probably the best platform to connect with me on. PM me. I'll do my best to help you, or at least have a chat, or whatever it is. But yeah, have a great day, Johnny. I appreciate your time.
So thanks a lot, David.